My parents sat me down at an expensive restaurant to announce they were seizing my inheritance to fund my sister's luxury wedding. They called my life a hobby. I simply glanced at my uncle and nodded. When he opened his portfolio, their arrogance instantly turned to ice-cold fear. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The exhaustion I felt wasn't just physical. It was a deep, marrow-level weariness that seemed to weigh down my very bones. It had been exactly 3 weeks since the funeral, and the silence in my small apartment, usually a sanctuary for my work, felt deafening. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at a half-packed box of Grandma's old journals, when the text message lit up my phone screen. It was my mother, Victoria. Dinner tonight at Le Jardin, 7 p.m. sharp. Don't be late, we need to discuss the future. There was no, how are you doing? No, are you holding up okay? Just a command. My hands were trembling slightly, a residual effect of the adrenaline and grief that had been my constant companions for the last 6 months of Grandma's life. I was the one who had moved in with her when the dementia began to claw away at her brilliant mind. I was the one who learned to change sheets without moving a frail body, who learned to cook soft foods that tasted like memory, who held her hand through the night terrors when she forgot who she was. My sister Vanessa, she had visited twice, once to ask if she could have Grandma's vintage pearl necklace early for a photo shoot, and once to introduce her new fiancé, a man who spent the entire 20 minutes checking his watch. My parents, Ewan and Victoria, had been too busy with the business to do the heavy lifting, though they were remarkably present when it came time to meet with the estate attorney regarding the house. I rubbed my temples, trying to ward off the headache blooming behind my eyes. I was an archival researcher. I spent my days preserving history, ensuring that the truth of the past wasn't lost to decay. It was quiet, meticulous work that required patience and reverence, traits my family seemed to lack entirely. They saw my life as small, quiet, unimportant. I stood up, catching my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked older than 29. The dark circles under my eyes were like bruises, but beneath the fatigue, there was something else. A hardness. A steel spine that had been forged in the fire of watching the strongest woman I knew slowly fade away. Grandma had told me things in those late hours, moments of lucid clarity that cut through the fog of her illness. She had given me instructions. I grabbed my purse and a specific manila folder I had been keeping in my safe. I wasn't going to this dinner unarmed. I didn't know exactly what future they wanted to discuss, but I had a sinking feeling it wasn't about my well-being. I arrived at Le Jardin 5 minutes early, but they were already seated. The restaurant was the kind of place where the lighting was too dim, the menus had no prices, and the silence was aggressively enforced by the staff. My father, Ewan, was swirling a glass of red wine, looking bored. My mother, Victoria, was meticulously adjusting the napkin on her lap, her face set in that mask of polite disdain she wore so well. And there sat Vanessa, glowing with the artificial radiance of a woman who believes the world revolves around her ring finger. As I approached the table, the air felt heavy, charged with an unspoken agenda. I pulled out my chair, the scrape of wood against the floor sounding like a gunshot in the quiet room. "You look tired, Margaret," Victoria said, not as a concern but as an observation of a flaw. "I hope you're not going to be gloomy tonight. We have happy news to discuss." I placed my purse on the floor, feeling the weight of the folder inside it against my leg. "I'm fine, Mother, just adjusting." "Well, adjust faster," Vanessa chirped, taking a sip of her champagne. "We have a schedule to keep." I looked at them, my family. They looked like a portrait of success, but I knew the cracks in the foundation better than anyone. They had no idea that the ground they were standing on was about to shift. The betrayal was worse than the grief itself, because it came with a smile. The appetizers arrived, tiny, intricate sculptures of seafood that looked too precious to eat. I barely touched mine. My stomach was a knot of anxiety, but I forced myself to sit still to observe. That was what I did best, after all. I was a researcher. I gathered data before I formed a conclusion. So, Ewan started, wiping his mouth with a linen napkin. We've been looking at the finances, Margaret, the estate. I stiffened. The will hasn't been probated yet, Dad. Uncle Julian is the executor. Haven't even had the reading. Uncle Julian is old, Victoria dismissed with a wave of her hand, her diamond bracelets clinking softly. He's practically senile. We've been helping him streamline things, and we've come to a decision as a family. A decision? I asked, my voice steady despite the rapid beating of my heart. Yes, Vanessa leaned forward, her eyes sparkling with predatory excitement. About the wedding. You know Pierre and I have been looking at venues in Lake Como. It's absolutely essential that we book the Villa d'Este. It's the only place that fits the aesthetic. I blinked. That sounds expensive, Vanessa. I thought you guys were on a budget. We were, Vanessa smiled, a wide, beatific expression that didn't reach her eyes. But Mom and Dad explained to me that Grandma left a significant amount in savings. Liquid cash. About $300,000, right? My blood ran cold. That money, Grandma's Freedom Fund. She had scraped that together over 40 years, hiding it from Grandpa's gambling debts, saving it from my father's failed business ventures. She had told me explicitly, "This is for you, Maggie, for your research, for your own house, so you never have to answer to anyone." That money, I said slowly, was intended for specific purposes. Family purposes, Ewan corrected, his voice booming slightly. And right now, the priority of this family is Vanessa's wedding. It's going to be the social event of the season, Margaret. The networking opportunities alone will pay for it. So, you're taking Grandma's life savings, I clarified, my voice dropping to a whisper, and blowing it on a party. It's not a party, Vanessa snapped, her facade cracking. It's my wedding, it's my future, and what were you going to do with it? Buy more dusty books? Hide away in that dark apartment? Margaret, Victoria interjected, her tone dripping with condescension. Let us be realistic. You're 29, you're single, you have a job that, well, let's be honest, it's basically a hobby. You play with old papers. Vanessa is building a life. She's marrying into a prominent family. We need to make a good showing. Grandma would have wanted her money to go where it would do the most good. Grandma despised Pierre, I said, unable to stop the words. She called him a suit with no soul. The table went silent. Ewan's face turned a shade of purple I hadn't seen in years. That is enough, he hissed. The decision is made. We are the parents. We decide how the family resources are allocated. Since you aren't doing anything important with your life anyway, we figured you wouldn't mind making this sacrifice for your sister. I looked at Vanessa. She shrugged, taking another sip of champagne. It's just fair, Margaret. You had all that time with Grandma. You got the sentimental stuff. I get the future. I looked down at my plate. The anger was there, boiling and hot, but beneath it was a strange, cold calm. They were so confident, so utterly sure of their power over me. They saw me as the doormat, the quiet one who would just nod and cry and accept whatever scraps they threw my way. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They assumed I was just the nursemaid. They forgot that I was also the one who organized Grandma's filing cabinet. They forgot that I read every single document she signed. And they certainly forgot that before the dementia set in, Grandma had been the sharpest woman in the state. I took a slow sip of water. So you've already spent it, in your minds. We've put down deposits, Victoria admitted breezily. Non-refundable, of course, so don't try to cause a scene. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I wouldn't dream of causing a scene, Mother. I just want to make sure everyone is here for the announcement. Everyone is here, Ewan said, confused. Not quite, I said, glancing at the entrance of the restaurant. To understand why this moment was so pivotal, you have to understand the last 3 years. When Grandma got sick, my parents were devastated on Facebook, but absent in real life. Ewan, her own son, couldn't handle the smell of the house, the scent of medicine and old age. Victoria claimed that seeing Grandma like that was just too traumatic for her fragile constitution. So I did it. I moved out of my loft. I put my PhD research on hold. I became a ghost in my own life to be the anchor in hers. I washed her hair. I read her favorite mysteries to her until my voice was hoarse. I managed the doctors, the pills, the panic attacks. And during those long afternoons, while Grandma was lucid, we talked about them. She saw it all. She saw Vanessa's greed, how she only called when she needed rent money. She saw Ewan's incompetence with money, how he had drained his own retirement on sure-thing investments. "They are vultures, Maggie," she had whispered to me one night, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "They wait for the carcass, but I won. T let them pick my bones clean, not the money I saved for you." Now, looking at them across the white tablecloth, I saw exactly what she meant. The primary antagonist wasn't really Vanessa. Vanessa was just the symptom, a spoiled, vacuous girl who had been taught that the world owed her everything. No, the real villain was Victoria, my mother. Victoria was a woman who curated her life like a museum exhibit. Everything had to be beautiful, expensive, and enviable. She had never worked a day in her life, yet she managed the family's social standing with the ruthlessness of a general. She looked at me, her dowdy, intellectual daughter, with a mixture of pity and embarrassment. She looked at Vanessa, her beautiful, graspable extension, as her crowning achievement. "You know," Victoria said, breaking the silence, "we were thinking that since you're saving so much on rent by living in that studio, maybe you could also contribute to the floral budget. The hydrangeas Pier wants are flown in from Holland." "I'm not contributing a cent," I said quietly. "Don't be selfish," Ewan snapped. "You're part of this family." "Am I?" I asked, "because it feels like I'm just the bank." "Oh, stop being dramatic," Vanessa rolled her eyes. "You're just jealous because I'm getting married and well, you." Just then, a shadow fell over the table. "Good evening," a deep, gravelly voice rumbled. My parents jumped. Ewan actually knocked his fork onto the floor. Standing there was Uncle Julian. Now you have to understand Uncle Julian. He wasn't just Grandma's brother, he was a retired forensic accountant. He wore suits that were 20 years out of style, but pressed to perfection. He had eyes that looked like they could scan a balance sheet through a lead wall. He was the one person my parents were terrified of because he had never, not once, bought into their bullshit. "Julian," Victoria squeaked, her voice jumping an octave. We weren't expecting you." "I gathered," Julian said, his face unmoving. He didn't sit. He just stood at the head of the table, looming like a Judgment Day totem. He held a battered leather briefcase in his left hand. "We were just having a family dinner," Ewan stammered, sweating. "Discussing plans." "Yes," Julian said. "Margaret texted me. She said you were discussing the disposition of my sister's savings." "Well, yes," Victoria rallied, trying to regain her composure. "As the family, we decided it's best to use it for Vanessa's wedding. It's what Mother would have wanted." Julian looked at Victoria. He didn't blink. Then he looked at me. I gave him a tiny nod. He set the briefcase on the table, right on top of the bread basket. The sound of the heavy latches clicking open snap-snap echoed in the silence. "That is fascinating," Julian said, pulling out a thick document bound in blue paper. "Because according to the legal structure of the estate, which I administer, there is absolutely no savings for you to discuss." "What do you mean?" Vanessa asked, her fork hovering halfway to her mouth. "The money is there. We saw the bank statements." "You saw the statements of a dormant account," Julian said, sliding the document across the table toward Ewan. "But you didn't see the trust." "Trust," Ewan whispered, the color draining from his face. "The Margaret E. Sterling Irrevocable Trust," Julian read the title aloud. "Established 4 years ago, funded entirely by the liquid assets you are currently trying to spend." I leaned back in my chair, watching their faces. The trap wasn't just set, it had just snapped shut. "And," Julian continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous low, "there is a clause in here regarding misappropriation of perceived assets that I think you need to read immediately. Specifically, the part about your existing debts to the estate." Vanessa dropped her fork. It clattered loudly against the china. "Debts," she whispered. I took a sip of my wine. It finally tasted good. The silence in Uncle Julian's vintage Volvo was heavier than the one in the restaurant, but it wasn't oppressive. It was the silence of a library, my natural habitat. It was the silence of information being processed. "Did you see Ewan's face?" Julian asked quietly, keeping his eyes on the rain-slicked road. He looked like he'd swallowed a lemon whole. "I saw," I replied, clutching the blue binder to my chest. "But Uncle Julian, what exactly is in here? I knew Grandma had the trust, but I didn't know about the debts." Julian pulled the car up to the curb of my apartment building. He put the car in park and turned to me, the streetlights casting long shadows across his craggy face. "Margaret, your grandmother didn't just protect your inheritance. She kept a ledger. A detailed, notarized ledger of every single time your parents came to her with their hands out." We went up to my apartment. I made tea Earl Grey, strong just the way Grandma liked it, while Julian spread the documents out on my small dining table. "Here," he pointed a callous finger at a spreadsheet. 2018, Ewan's import-export venture. He borrowed $50,000, unpaid. 2020, the remodel on their house to increase market value. Another $40,000, unpaid. 2022, a bridge loan to cover payroll for a business that doesn't seem to exist. 60,000. I stared at the numbers. They blurred together into a terrifying sum. They owe the estate over $150,000. With interest, Julian corrected, tapping a clause at the bottom. Compounded annually. The total is closer to 200,000, and here is the kicker, Margaret. The trust stipulates that before any residual assets can be distributed to other beneficiaries, i.e., your mother, all outstanding debts to the estate must be settled. "So they can't get a dime," I whispered, realizing the scope of the trap. "In fact, they owe the estate money." "Correct, but that's not what worries me," Julian said, his voice grim. He pulled a separate, thinner folder from his briefcase. "I did some digging of my own yesterday. I have friends in the county clerk's office. I wanted to see why they were so desperate for this wedding to happen now." He slid a document toward me. It was a foreclosure notice. "They haven't paid their mortgage in 6 months," Julian said softly. "They are drowning, Margaret. This wedding isn't a celebration. It's a bait-hand switch. They need Vanessa to marry Pierre so they can access his family's connections, or perhaps ask him for a loan to save their house. They were banking on Grandma's savings to pay for the wedding to get to Pierre." I felt a wave of nausea. "They're using Vanessa, they're selling her off." "Precisely," Julian nodded. "And now that we've cut off the funding, they are going to be desperate, and desperate people are dangerous." I looked at the papers. I was an archivist. My entire career was built on finding the truth buried in paper. I looked at the foreclosure date. Then I looked at the date of the bridge loan from Grandma. "Wait," I said, pulling a magnifying glass from my desk drawer, a tool of the trade. I hovered over the signature on the 2022 loan document. "Uncle Julian, look at this." He leaned in. "What am I looking at?" "Grandma's tremor," I said, my voice shaking. By 2022, her Parkinson's was advanced. Her signature was shaky. It had a specific jagged quality to the M. "Look at this signature. It's smooth, fluid." Julian's eyes went wide. "You think it's a forgery?" "I don't think," I said, the cold steel returning to my spine. "I know, I have her journals from that month. She couldn't even hold a pen that week. I was feeding her soup." "This changes everything," Julian whispered. "This isn't just debt, this is fraud." My phone buzzed on the table. It was Victoria. Incoming call. "It's starting," I said. "Answer it," Julian commanded. "Put it on speaker. Let's hear what lies they spin now." I swiped the green icon and set the phone on top of the foreclosure notice, the irony not lost on me. "Margaret," Victoria's voice shrieked through the speaker, so loud it distorted. How dare you? How dare you ambush us like that with that dinosaur of an uncle? Hello, Mother, I said calmly, leaning back in my chair. I didn't ambush anyone. I attended a dinner you invited me to. You humiliated us, she screamed. In front of the staff. Do you have any idea how much stress you are causing your sister? She has been crying for hours. Her wedding is ruined because of your selfishness. My selfishness? I asked, looking at Julian. He was taking notes on a yellow legal pad. Mother, you were planning to steal $300,000 that Grandma left for me. Steal, it's family money, Victoria countered, her voice dropping to that manipulative, reasonable tone she used when she wanted something. Margaret, listen to me. Grandma was confused at the end. She promised that money to us. She knew we were having a hard time with the business. That trust, it's just a formality. Julian manipulated her into signing it. Grandma was never confused about money, I said sharply. She knew exactly who you were. We raised you. Ewan's voice boomed in the background. He must have grabbed the phone. We put a roof over your head, and now, when we need a little flexibility, you hide behind lawyers. You ungrateful little. I'm looking at the ledger, Dad. I cut him off. My voice wasn't loud, but it stopped him cold. What ledger? Ewan asked, his voice cracking. The one Grandma kept, I lied smoothly. The one where she recorded every loan. The $50,000 in 2018, the $40,000 in 2020, the $60,000 in 2022. There was a silence on the line so profound, I could hear Ewan breathing. Those were gifts, Ewan stammered. She gave those to us. That's not what the promissory notes say, I pressed, glancing at the forged document, and it's certainly not what the signature says. What do you mean? Victoria's voice was back, sharp and panicked. I mean, I said, leaning closer to the phone, that I know about the forgery, Mom. I know Grandma didn't sign that loan in 2022. I was there. She couldn't hold a pen. You don't know what you're talking about, Victoria hissed. You're making things up. You're insane. Am I asked. Because I also have a copy of a foreclosure notice here on the table. 142 Oak Street. Notice of default. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. You wouldn't, Victoria whispered. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was fear. Margaret, please, you can't tell Vanessa. She doesn't know. She doesn't know you're broke, I asked. She doesn't know you're using her wedding to find a bailout. We are doing this for her, Victoria sobbed, a theatrical, gasping sound. Pierre comes from money, real money. If they marry, his father is going to invest in Ewan's company. We can pay everything back. We can pay the estate back. Just release the funds for the wedding. Please, Maggie, be a good sister, just this once. I am being a good sister, I said coldly, by not letting you sell her. If you ruin this, Ewan threatened, his voice low and venomous, you are no daughter of mine. I will cut you off completely. You already have, Dad, I said. You cut me off the moment you looked at me and saw a bank account instead of a human being. I hung up. My hand was shaking, but not from fear, from rage. They admitted it, Julian said quietly. They admitted the motive. They're going to come for me, I said, standing up and pacing the small room. They aren't going to stop. They need that money too badly. They're going to use Vanessa. Then we need to be ready, Julian said. But we need more proof. We need to prove the forgery definitively before we make the final move. If we accuse them without an expert, they'll claim you're just a bitter sister trying to sabotage the wedding. I know an expert, I said. Dr. Eris. He specializes in historical document authentication. He owes me a favor. The next 3 days were a blur of harassment. My phone didn't stop ringing. Texts from cousins I hadn't seen in a decade popped up. Why are you doing this to your family? Just let Vanessa have her day. My parents had launched a PR campaign against me, painting me as the jealous, spinster sister hoarding the grandmother's wealth out of spite. But I was busy. I took the morning off work and met Dr. Eris at his lab. He placed the 2022 document under a spectral comparator. It's a clumsy attempt, Eris muttered, adjusting the lens. See here, the ink pressure. When your grandmother wrote, the pressure was inconsistent due to the tremors. This signature, uniform pressure. It was drawn, not written. And look at the ink composition, it's a ballpoint pen. Your grandmother only used fountain pens. You told me that yourself. She did, I confirmed. She said ballpoints were for savages. It's a definite forgery, Eris concluded, printing out a report. I'll stake my reputation on it. I had the gun. Now I just needed the bullet. I drove to the bridal shop where Vanessa was having her final fitting. I knew I shouldn't go, but I needed to know if she was in on it. If she knew about the forgery, she was dead to me. If she didn't, well, she was collateral damage, but she deserved to know. I walked into the boutique. It smelled of lavender and money. Vanessa was standing on a podium, draped in white silk and lace, looking like a princess. Victoria was fussing with the train. When the door chime rang, they both looked up. Victoria's face went pale. Vanessa's face went red. Get out, Vanessa screamed, pointing a gloved finger at me. Get out of here, you've done enough damage. I need to talk to you, Vanessa, I said, ignoring my mother. Alone. I have nothing to say to you, Vanessa spat. Mom told me everything, how you tricked Grandma, how you're holding the money hostage because you're jealous that Pierre chose me. Is that what she told you? I asked, stepping closer. The shop assistant looked terrified. She told me you're trying to ruin us, Vanessa cried, tears welling up. Pierre is furious. He says if the funding for the venue isn't secured by Friday, he's calling it off. Do you want that? Do you want me to be alone like you? Vanessa, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. Mom and Dad are broke. Liar, Victoria lunged at me, actually grabbing my arm. Don't listen to her, Nessie, she's lying. I shook my mother off. They are in foreclosure, Vanessa. They forged Grandma's signature on a loan document to steal $60,000 last year. They are using your wedding to get Pierre's father to bail them out. Vanessa looked at me, then at Victoria. For a second, I saw doubt. Tell her it's not true, Mom, Vanessa whispered. Victoria straight. And her jacket, composing herself. Of course it's not true. Your sister is mentally unstable. The grief, it's made her paranoid. She looked at me with eyes like sharks. If you don't leave right now, Margaret, I will call the police. Go ahead, I said, reaching into my purse and pulling out the report from Dr. Eris. But you might want to show them this first. It's the forensic analysis of the loan you borrowed. I held it out. Victoria didn't take it. She just stared at it, her breathing shallow. Vanessa looked at the paper, then at her mother's terrified face. Mom, Vanessa asked, her voice trembling, why do you look like that? It's complicated, Vanessa, Victoria stammered. Business is complex. It's not complex, I said. It's a crime. Just then the front door of the shop opened. We all turned. It was Pierre, and he wasn't alone. He was with a man I recognized from the society pages, his father, Mr. Dubois. We were told there was a problem with the venue deposit, Mr. Dubois said, his voice booming. He looked at Victoria, then at the tears on Vanessa's face, and finally at me. And judging by the volume of this conversation, I assume the problem is significant. Victoria looked like she was going to faint. Pierre, Vanessa sobbed, stepping off the podium. What is going on? Pierre asked, looking annoyed. Victoria, you said the funds were being transferred today. There is a slight delay, Victoria lied, her voice high and brittle. A banking error. I looked at my mother. I looked at the sister who had called me jealous. I looked at the man who was about to marry into a fraud. This was it, the point of no return. It's not a banking error, I said clearly. Margaret, don't, Victoria begged, a whisper of pure desperation. It's not an error, I repeated, turning to Mr. Dubois. There are no funds, and there never were. The silence that followed my declaration was absolute. It was the kind of silence that sucks the air out of a room, leaving everyone gasping. The bridal shop, with its soft velvet drapes and crystal chandeliers, suddenly felt like a courtroom. Mr. Dubois turned slowly to Victoria. His face, usually a mask of jovial politeness, had hardened into granite. What did she say? Victoria was trembling so violently that the hangers on the rack next to her rattled. Margaret is confused. She doesn't understand high finance. The assets are tied up in various instruments. There are no instruments, Mother, I said, my voice steady, though my knees felt like water. There is only debt. I want to see the books, Mr. Dubois said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous rumble. Now. We can't just, Victoria started. Now, Dubois barked. Call your husband. We are meeting at your house in 30 minutes. If you are not there with the financial records, my son walks away, and I will ensure every bank in the city knows why. Pierre looked at Vanessa, who was standing frozen on the podium, tears streaming down her face, ruining the silk bodice of a $10,000 dress she couldn't afford. He didn't look sympathetic. He looked embarrassed. Get changed, Vanessa, he said coldly. The drive to my parents' house was a blur of rain and neon lights. Uncle Julian drove, his jaw set. You started it, Maggie, he said softly. Now we have to finish it. No mercy. No mercy, I repeated, clutching the blue binder. When we arrived, Ewan was already in the living room, pouring a drink. He looked up as the procession entered, me, Julian, a weeping Vanessa, a terrified Victoria, and the stony-faced Dubois men. The house, usually an impeccably staged showpiece, felt cold. What is this? Ewan asked, feigning outrage, though the glass in his hand shook. Victoria, why did you bring them here? They know, Ewan, Victoria whispered, collapsing onto the designer sofa. She told them. Ewan's eyes darted to me, pure, unadulterated hatred. You traitorous little. Sit down, Ewan, Mr. Dubois commanded. He didn't ask, he ordered. He took a seat in the wingback chair, looking like a judge. Your daughter claims you are insolvent. She claims you are funding this wedding with stolen money. Convince me she is wrong. Ewan laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. Insolvent? That's absurd. We have liquidity issues, sure, cash flow is tight, but assets? We are swimming in assets. Show him the foreclosure notice, Margaret, Uncle Julian said from the doorway. He stood like a sentinel, blocking the exit. I walked forward and placed the document on the coffee table. The stark red letters, Notice of Default, seemed to burn a hole in the polished wood. Ewan stared at it. He didn't touch it. That is a clerical error, Ewan stammered. My attorney is handling it. I checked with the county clerk this morning, Julian said violently. It's not an error. You haven't paid your mortgage in 6 months. You are 30 days away from the sheriff evicting you. Mr. Dubois picked up the paper. He read it, his lips thinning, then he looked at Pierre. They're broke. We are not broke, Victoria shrieked, jumping up. We just need a bridge. Once the wedding happens, once the families are united, we can restructure. It's a temporary setback. So you were using us, Pierre said, stepping away from Vanessa as if she were contagious. You were using my family's name to secure new loans. No, we love you, Vanessa cried, reaching for him. Pierre, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. But there's more, I said, cutting through the noise. I had to end this. I had to sever the limb to save the patient. They didn't just lie to you, Mr. Dubois. They stole from the estate, from their own mother. I laid the second document down, the spreadsheet of debts. And then, the piece de resistance, Dr. Aris's forensic report on the forged signature. Last year, I said, looking directly at Ewan, you forged Grandma's signature on a promissory note for $60,000. You took the money while she was bedridden. While I was spoon-feeding her because her hands shook too much to hold a spoon, you decided she was steady enough to sign a legal document. That's a lie, Ewan roared, stepping toward me with a raised hand. Uncle Julian stepped forward, moving faster than a man of 70 should be able to. He didn't touch Ewan, but his presence was enough to make my father recoil. Touch her, Julian growled, and you will spend the night in a cell. It's not a lie, I continued, my voice gaining strength. This report proves it. The ink, the pressure, the pen type. It's a forgery, Dad. It's fraud. Felony fraud. The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Mr. Dubois picked up the forensic report. He scanned it, then dropped it on the table as if it were covered in filth. He stood up and buttoned his jacket. "Pierre," he said, "we are leaving." "Pierre, please," Vanessa sobbed, running to him. "Please, I love you. None of this is my fault." Pierre looked at her. For a moment, I saw a flicker of pity. But then he looked at Ewan and Victoria, two people who had lied to his face for months, who had tried to entrap him in their financial ruin. "You might not have known," Pierre said quietly, "but you're one of them. You're just like them, Vanessa. You spend money you don't have to impress people you don't like." He pulled his arm from her grasp. "The engagement is off. Do not contact me." The front door slammed shut, echoing like a gavel strike. Vanessa stood in the center of the room, her hands hovering in empty air. She turned slowly to look at our parents. Victoria was weeping into her hands. Ewan was staring at the floor, defeated. "You knew," Vanessa whispered. The realization washed over her face, stripping away the entitlement, leaving just a heartbroken girl. "You knew you were broke. You knew there was no money. You let me plan this. You let me humiliate myself." "We did it for you," Victoria wailed, "to give you a good life." "No," Vanessa screamed, a raw, guttural sound that made me flinch. "You did it for you, so you could keep this house, so you could pretend to be rich. You sold me. You sold your own daughter for a mortgage payment." She grabbed a vase from the side table, a Ming vase Victoria loved more than she loved us, and hurled it at the wall. It shattered into 1,000 pieces. "I hate you," Vanessa screamed. "I hate you both." She ran past me, out the door into the rain. I looked at my parents. They were small. They were broken. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of them. "I'm giving the evidence to Julian," I said calmly. "He's the executor. He'll decide whether to file criminal charges for the fraud, but as for the trust, you will never see a dime. Grandma is finally safe from you." I turned and walked out, leaving them in the ruins of their own making. The fallout was swift and brutal. Without the promise of the Dubois connection, my father's creditors circled like sharks. The foreclosure proceeded at lightning speed. Within 2 months, the house on Oak Street, the symbol of my parents' vanity, was sold at auction. They moved into a 2-bedroom rental in a neighboring town, far away from the country club crowd they had tried so hard to impress. Uncle Julian, in a moment of mercy I wasn't sure they deserved, decided not to press criminal charges regarding the forgery, on one condition. They signed a confession and agreed to a repayment plan where a percentage of Ewan's pension would go directly back into the estate until the debt was cleared. They signed. They had no choice. I didn't see them for a long time. I didn't want to. But I did see Vanessa. About 3 weeks after the red wedding, as I mentally called it, I heard a knock on my apartment door. It was late, raining again. Vanessa was standing there. She wasn't wearing designer clothes. She was wearing jeans and a hoodie, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. She was holding a wet cardboard box. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice small. I stepped aside. She walked in and set the box down. It was full of her things. "Pierre sent these back," she said, staring at the box. "He kept the ring, obviously." She looked around my apartment. It was small, cluttered with books and papers, smelling of tea and old paper. It was the opposite of everything she had been raised to value. "It's nice here," she said softly. "It's real." "It's home," I said. "Do you want some tea?" She nodded, tears spilling over. "Maggie, I'm so sorry about what I said, about everything. I was so stupid. I wanted to be what Mom wanted me to be. I thought that was how you got love." I looked at my sister, the golden child, the one who had everything until she had nothing. I realized then that she was a victim too. Grandma had seen it. "Vanessa is a bird in a gilded cage," she had written in one of her journals. "She doesn't know the door is locked." I walked over and hugged her. She stiffened at first, then collapsed into me, sobbing. We stood there in my tiny kitchen for a long time. "You can stay here," I said, "until you get on your feet, but you have to get a job, a real one." She laughed, a watery choke sound. "I think I'd like that. I'm tired of pretending." 6 months later, the trust was finally settled. With the bad debt sequestered, Uncle Julian released the funds. I didn't buy a mansion. I didn't buy a sports car. I bought a small, stone cottage on the edge of town, with a garden that needed work and a room with a large, north-facing window perfect for a library. I quit my job at the firm and started my own independent research consultancy. On the day I moved in, I unpacked the last box. It was Grandma's journals. I placed them on the shelf, right next to a framed photo of her. I sat in my new chair, looking out at the garden where I planned to plant hydrangeas. Not the expensive imported ones, but the wild, hardy kind that could survive the winter. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Vanessa. She was working as a receptionist at a vet clinic and taking night classes. "Coming over for dinner Sunday? I'm making Grandma's lasagna. I promise not to burn it this time." I smiled. I had lost the parents I thought I needed, but I had found the sister I never really knew. And more importantly, I had found myself. Grandma was right. The money wasn't just currency, it was freedom. And as I sat there in the silence of my own home, paid for by the love of a woman who saw the truth, I had never felt richer.